I have not been to Minnesota in probably 20 years.
Bring your ass.
These guys survived the David Kahn era of Timberwolves basketball and live to tell about it. It's Flagrant Howls.
Welcome to a Minnesota Timberwolves lifestyle podcast, Flagrant Howls. The sports dad, Judd Zulgad. It's Phil Mackey. We were in the arena last night. If you missed the live recap on the SKOR North YouTube channel, the live Flagrant Howls that then morphed into a vent line therapy session. It's like an hour and 10 minutes. Definitely go check that out when you have time. But Judd, we figured we'd jump on here, do a little feedback Friday, answer some questions, and take in some stuff from the audience. People are still trying to figure out how to cope with what happened last night. But I think I think what happened at the end, once the game was over and the clock hit zero, there were still like, I don't know, 10, 12,000 fans in that arena chanting, "Let's go Wolves," and giving them the applause as they walked off the court. So it kind of feels like, as much of a buzzkill as it was, sleeping on it, fans are looking at the totality of the season and Anthony Edwards at age 22 emerging into this incredible superstar and like taking a positive feeling out of the season, even though it ended the way that it did last night.
Yeah, I mean, it's a disappointing finish, no question, because, you know, that the Wolves got done last night. But as far as the totality of the entire season, it was a lot of fun. And I mean, this team won 50 plus games. You know, it feels like this team did everything that was potentially talked about for 2023, 22, 23, that all came to fruition this season. And so I think overall the Wolves recaptured, and it's been a long time, the imagination of the state. The basketball was great. It was a lot of fun. There's a lot of things to be optimistic about. And now the fun part is going into next season, there's going to be expectations there.
Yeah. I
always feel like we've tried to, and I understand why, tone down the expectations, right? It's like, well, the Wolves could do this, but we're not quite sure. And I think now that there's going to be a confidence and a little bit more of a certainty that this team now is a legitimate team with a superstar who's growing. So there are, as bad as last night felt, I think there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic about where this team is going. And as we talked about last night, a lot of things have to play out. But if they play out right, I think that you are looking at now a franchise that can very much establish itself as an upper echelon franchise.
And it does center around Anthony Edwards. This is a crazy stat that I saw from Nick Wright, Fox Sports 1's Nick Wright. He uncovered this. Anthony Edwards is the sixth player ever to average 25 points per game, make an All-NBA team, first team or second team All-NBA, and a conference finals all in the same season before turning 23 years old. Here's the list. Here's the six guys that have done those three things before turning 23 in the same season. 25 points a game, first or second team All-NBA, trip to the conference finals. Anthony Edwards, 2024. Kevin Durant in 2011. Pre-knee injury Derrick Rose in 2011. LeBron James in 2007. Pre-knee injury Amari Stoudemire in 2005, who was one of the premier bigs on his way to superstardom, and then, was it microfracture surgery or whatever he had?
Yes, it was.
And then 2001 Kobe Bryant. So you're talking about three of the all-time greatest players in history, Kobe, LeBron, and Kevin Durant, and then two of the greatest what if they didn't suffer a knee injury cases in Derrick Rose and Amari Stoudemire. That's pretty good company to be in.
Yeah, and I mean, I think if you watch Ant play, that makes sense. Like everything, we can parse apart players, and we do a lot, and I think it's fair because it's fun. But, you know, there's something about Ant, how he plays, how he's wired, the fact that he had no time for like hugs and handshakes last night, which I absolutely love. There is just something about him that fundamentally says you can build around this guy, not just as a player, but also a personality, which is important. And I think the Wolves have done a very nice job of having guys like Kyle Anderson and Conley who are there to support Ant and certainly provide a veteran presence. But I also think as Ant now grows, that he's going to become that guy as well. He's going to mature as a player. I'm just when you have a player like that in sports, especially basketball, I'm hard pressed not to be optimistic about it. Like everything about him screams superstar. And we can say, well, he didn't do this or he didn't do that. And I guess my comeback is look what he did do. And also, more importantly, look how he did it. That's my biggest thing. There's a certain eye test here, right?
Yes.
Like there's a certain you can put up great stats and we can talk about, oh man, the stats, or you can have a great series. And that's great. But there's a certain way Ant carries himself as a player and a person on the basketball court that just passes the eye test of this guy belongs in the company that you just read.
Yes, he passes the top echelon superstar vibe check at age 22.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he ran into a guy that's like 3 years further along in his journey, and a guy in Luka Doncic that also started playing professionally in Europe when he was a teenager, 16 years old, playing in these top leagues. And Kyrie, who's won a championship.
Look at what I just urge you, because yes, Doncic is phenomenal. I'm sorry, the trash talking Bugs fans. I love it. I love how
it's hilarious.
But I just love that he daggers your ass though. But like it's one thing to do that and not dagger you. Then it's like you look like an idiot, right?
Yeah.
But this guy daggers your butt every time, or it seems like it. But you know what? Dallas brought in Kyrie, which at the time was controversial because it's like you only have one basketball, and that's worked. And then Dallas went at the deadline and made moves, and like their defense turned around. All of those lob dunks are not possible without those moves. So I guess my point is, when you're looking at the Wolves as a bit of a work in progress here, and you think, well, why didn't Ant get past the Mavs? Look at what the Mavs had. I mean, that's what Tim Conley's after, right?
Yeah.
So it can't just be, well, if Ant failed them, it's got to be, okay, Ant's the most important player, but what's the infrastructure around Ant? And if you get Ant a Kyrie type, what happens then?
Yeah, no, this was, I know that there's some people who are frustrated, and the way that it ended is a bad taste in everyone's mouths. But if you just zoom out, there's really no other way to look at this season other than wildly successful from so many different standpoints. And we're going to get into some of the feedback, because there's some angst in the feedback here that people have sent us. You can always email us through the SKOR North app. There's a feedback tab. That's the best way to hit us up on any show. We do Feedback Friday live on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. But we're mixing it in more on Flagrant Howls here too. Before we dive in, a shout out to our friends at Legendary Golf, who have provided us with some awesome swag here during these playoffs. So Legendary Golf, locally owned, family operated, veteran owned company, lgndy.co. That's lgndy.co. And a portion of all of their purchases, anything you purchase on their website, a portion of it goes to veteran organizations. So it's just a great cause. You can use the promo code HOWL at checkout for 20% off your order. That's promo code HOWL, HOWL, for 20% off your order at lgndy.co. A bunch of people have asked, like, hey, where'd you get the
it's nice.
The state of Minnesota silhouette
I'm
with
where you got it.
the wolf?
Yeah.
You get it at lgndy.co.
I'll have to go there myself and
we'll see if we can get you one, Judd.
perhaps use the correct code so that SKOR North gets the proper attribution.
Yes, please do. Let's get to the feedback here. Brian Darling says, I love Minnesota sports. Not a huge NBA fan until this year. The Wolves have brought me back to the NBA. I am so excited for next year. Let's go Wolves. And then Chris H says, this was the most fun non-Viking season I've had in my adult life as a Minnesota sports fan.
Yeah, I buy that completely. Depending on your age, absolutely.
It is the type of season that, like the Vikings have had a couple of these along the way, where 98 or 2009 that ultimately ended in heartbreak, but they were so fun, and it was a magic carpet ride, and you went to the doorstep of the Super Bowl. the 2004 Timberwolves went to the doorstep. That whole era was like playoff one and done, but then they finally break through. They get to the Western Conference Finals. Those are the types of seasons that do generate new fans. You jump on the bandwagon,
Absolutely.
you buy a jersey for the first time, maybe you get season tickets for the first time, and this was that type of season for the Timberwolves.
Yeah, and I also think that jumping on the bandwagon now is totally fair because they gave you something to watch. Like the team's not average at best, horrible at worst, and yeah, when I became a North Star fan, it was basically in the back-to-back years that they upset Montreal in the playoffs, didn't get to the Cup Finals that season, but then advanced to the Cup Finals in the spring of '81, and it was fantastic. I mean, that's what makes fans, young and old. And so, yes, this season, the ending was rough, but that being said, this season not only was fun, but here's the thing, too, that I like, if this is done right. And again, there's questions, but if this goes without a bunch of hitches, and it's the Wolves, so I say that with a little bit of caution, there's reason for optimism going forward now, too. Like the magic carpet ride of Keenum was interesting because in years like that, it's also like, this seems really improbable. And the Vikings certainly tried to extend the momentum by signing Kirk Cousins. But in that case, it was like the central piece or one of them was Keenum. And you were sort of like, okay, this isn't going to work long-term with Case, right? In this case with Ant, it 100% can work long-term. And so, yeah, I think that if you today take a deep breath, take a step back and think about what you just saw, there's a lot of sustainable ability here.
Yeah, it's all built around something that is sustainable for the next decade.
And he wants to be here.
A multifaceted superstar alpha player that has shown no indications that he doesn't love playing here, doesn't love what's happening with the organization, the coach. Darren Meering says, the Wolves' strength is defense, and Dallas has two cheat codes in Kyrie and Luka. It did feel that way. Like, well, it's, like I thought Rudy was supposed to be the defensive player of the year, this, that. I mean, these dudes are hitting every shot they want, hand and face or not. And the Wolves did a good job in Game 4 of giving them some different looks. They started the game with Jaden McDaniels on Kyrie and Anthony Edwards on Luka Doncic, and Edwards did a good job, but you're not going to shut those dudes down for an entire series. At the end of the day, you're probably going to have to win some games where you score 120 points instead of trying to keep the Mavericks to 105 or fewer to get your 4 wins. But yeah, like I told you this last night, the biggest headline takeaway in this series was Kyrie and Luka greater than Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns. And there's a bunch of other things. I mean, the Wolves missed 40% of their shots at the rim.
Right.
Dallas, I mean, hell, we were doing the math. Gafford and Lively combined to go 40 for 48 in the series. That's basically 40 dunks out of 48 shot attempts. Automatic twos. Lively did not miss a shot in the series. He played in 4 games, did not miss a shot in the series.
Yeah, despite being clearly concussed last night.
We got smoked again.
I know he did. But there's no way that guy, there was no way he didn't have a concussion. There is no way.
Yeah, well, just goes to show you if Luka Doncic puts a pocket pass right in your hip and you can just jump up with or without a concussion.
He's seeing 3 basketballs.
Yeah. He's seeing 3 rims. Dunk on the one in the middle. Alex Leggy says, hot take here. I believe some of the Wolves' spotty performance in this series can be attributed to poor energy conservation over the course of a lengthy playoff run. The Wolves clearly peaked in the first 6 games of the playoffs. I'd actually point to their season peak as being the magical sequence in Game 4 against Phoenix, where they had the team defensive stop giving way to Ant's tomahawk jam. Those Wolves didn't show up. Like that version of the Wolves from those first 6 games of the playoffs didn't show up at all in the series against Dallas. And we hardly even saw them in the last 5 games against Denver. Game 6, you saw them. It makes sense that the Wolves wouldn't fully understand how to expend energy throughout a 2-month playoff stretch. After all, 1 round of the playoffs is basically all they had known to that point. Mm-hmm. By comparison, Kyrie has ample experience playing into June. It makes a huge difference. There's no reason to overreact or shake things up too much. It's really not broke, so don't fix it. Cat can be the second best player on a championship-winning NBA team, in my opinion. Ant can be an elite playmaker and a better closer. This was a big step toward their goals this season. It's just the beginning.
Okay, I agree.
There's a lot of correct things in there.
I agree with a lot of that. Yep, I do agree with a lot of that, and I do agree that there's no question that the Wolves ran out of steam. Now, did they run out of steam because they got tired? Which I'm sure his point is spot on. Like, it's 3 rounds, it's a lot. It's unknown, it's uncharted territory. But I also will say this, we didn't see, and Denver didn't come close as far as we didn't see the blueprint to beat the Wolves until the Mavs. And it's not, just to be clear, Luka and Kyrie, who are marvelous players. But you think about what the Mavs did defensively, right? You think about the Mavs' length, which equaled the Wolves, and I would say was far tougher. Mm-hmm. And so, like, the Mavericks have almost a perfect, I think, playoff team. They've got 2 FU guys who are going to shoot the lights out. Interior wise, they are hard on you. Like, they will beat you up. Yeah. They will clog the paint. So, I think there's something to be said for, yes, the playoff run, as Ant discussed last night, took the Wolves into a territory playing at a time of year where they don't have or didn't have the experience and certainly looked drained. I also think it would be a disservice to the Mavericks not to credit them for the fact that their makeup caused the Wolves a lot of problems as far as tiring them out just in that series alone.
One thing, and this is more of a finals preview take than anything else, and I don't know that Wolves fans are ready for finals preview takes that don't involve the Wolves playing in the finals, but the difference between Boston and Dallas, there's a few, but Boston has 3rd, 4th, 5th scoring options that could go off. So they got their 2 main guys, right? Brown and Tatum. But then they've got other guys, like if Porzingis can be healthy in the finals, they have another week to get him sort of closer to 100%. They've got some other dudes that can go off and carry a scoring load. Dallas pretty much has the 2. I mean, Washington a little bit, but they pretty much have the 2 guys. But you could argue that those are also like 2 of the alpha scorers in this era of NBA basketball. So maybe they have to add a 3rd guy at some point if they come up short to Boston. But on like the only thing I really disagree with in Alex's email here is I have major reservations about Karl-Anthony Towns as the second guy, the second offensive option on a championship team, which brings us into, I would say the bulk of the emails that we got overnight were Cat related. Jeff Thompson chimes in, bye-bye, kitty. A lot of that type of stuff, like, see a cat. So Karl was asked about just his outlook going forward after the game. He sat down, did the podium stuff after the elimination. And Chris Hine from the Star Tribune put this tweet out. We were doing our live show when Cat was at the podium, so we weren't in the room for this. But Karl-Anthony Towns said he hopes to be back for a 10th year with the Timberwolves. Quote, I'm confident that I'm going to be able to be here with my brothers. I love this city. I love this organization. I love what it's given me in my life, given me and my family. But I find it really interesting that he's sort of speaking in this hopeful sense publicly, like he's under contract, massive contract. They just went to the Western Conference Finals.
Right. Yeah.
And the last thing you hear from him at the podium, in part because he's being asked about like his status in the future, is, boy, I hope I'm around, which means in his head, he's not 100% sure. He's hearing some of the chatter, I'm sure. He's on social media and he's, he's reading some of this stuff. What is the percent chance in your mind Karl gets traded this summer?
Boy, I don't think it's super high. Like I personally would explore it, and I do think that they will. And to all those who say, "Well, trade Gobert," the value difference between the 2 players, in my opinion, is enormous. Like if you trade Gobert, you're not going to get the return that you could potentially get for Karl. So I would put it at about like a 12%. Like I don't think it's non-existent, but I also don't think it's I also don't think it's pushing 50%, in part because you're not going to give him away. It's got to be the right trade. I don't think you're desperate to trade him, but I do think that when you look at going into the second apron, when you look at the construction of this team, like this Dallas series, yes, the Wolves won the first 2 rounds. And yes, Karl against the Joker was absolutely imperative to the second round upset or win against Denver. But Phil, that being said, guys like Tim Connelly don't watch this Western Conference Finals series and say, oh, too bad, bad luck. They watch, or, ref, you suck. They watch it and say, what do we lack that they had, right?
Yeah.
How do we end? And, when you got to the Western Conference Finals, and the Karl stands are going to go crazy about this, but the reality was this: Ant did not have a running mate.
I would feel better about Ant Cat as the pairing to drive this team to a championship if Cat was 24 years old and still taking his lumps and learning the way that Ant is at age 22.
Sure.
But we're not talking about it. We're talking about when you're 28, 29 years old and you've been in the league for 9 years. I mean, there's probably some examples of guys who started to blossom a little bit later, but that's a long time. That's a lot of experience. You've now been to the playoffs in 4 different seasons. He's still a really good, valuable player in a lot of ways. But with Anthony Edwards, I can tell you with 100% certainty, there is another level or 2 to his game that he will unlock between now and age 26. I can't sit here at all and tell you there's another level of Karl-Anthony Towns' game between age 28 and 31 that he's going to get to. And that's what they have to figure out. If the Wolves are going to go from 56 wins to 60 and 1 seed and Western Conference Finals to championship, is it another major tweak, or is it letting this loss simmer and sit and continue to bring the best out in this collection and they break through next year? I mean, they're having those conversations, I'm sure, over the next month. I think if you run it back, you're still going to be really good. You're probably going to win 50-plus games. You're probably going to be hosting a first-round playoff series.
Right.
You might even have a chance to go back to the Western Conference Finals. I have major reservations. Now, is it possible to keep Cat on the team as a third scoring option, like Porzingis is for Boston?
But then you get into
salaries. Kevin Love. Yeah, Kevin Love was, and that's the thing. I don't know if you can do that and keep Rudy.
Right.
But if you trade Rudy, now you've literally uprooted the core of why you won 56 games, which is defense and his rim protection
what
and
happens
everything.
To your defense? That's the question.
Yeah.
But here's my thing with Cat. I think that what we just saw in 3 rounds is the best Cat can give you in the playoffs. And that includes a very disappointing conference final. But, the Cat that we saw against Denver and to a certain degree against the Suns too, who at times played really, really well in his role, he is at his best a role type of player. He is not a take over player. And,
for some games he can take over.
Yes, but when it matters the most, I don't think he can. I think against Denver, his defense was great. And if you can absorb that salary, that's fine. I don't know that you can. But you need to get Ant with a running mate who can do what Kyrie does, what Kyrie did. And I mean, this team needs more shooting. Like the deficiencies of this team are not hidden. It's not like I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what they should do. And this is not implying they should blow the roster up. I don't believe that. I think the defensive first philosophy is outstanding. So I don't think this is a grasping at straws, Phil. I think that this is a very clear, as we discussed last night, roadmap. It's a blueprint of what you lack, what you need, and also what you have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because, we've had some preliminary, Kevin Durant as an example. If Cat averages 20-plus points regular season, postseason his numbers dip because things get tight, scouting reports start to stack up, and teams start to lean on the things that are hard for you, and that's why he has had a harder time scoring in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on paper he looks like a secondary scoring option, but then in practice, and actually this is a good segue into Brian Pauly's comment. Last year, you said Cat needed to accept his role as the number 2 on the team. And last night, you're saying now he needs to be the number 3. I would imagine a year or two before any of this, you were saying that he needs to step up and be the number 1 guy. Is the NBA cliff really that brutal that he's fallen from a team's number 1 to a team's number 3 in, say, a span of 3 years? Or has the Wolves' assessment of Cat been oversold all along? This is the complicated part. When you watch him play over his career, he is a unicorn talent. He's one of the only 7-footers that can knock down threes at that rate. He can dribble drive. He can handle. He can take the ball up the court. He can play defense, block shots. He used to have a better post game, and now he's become much more of a perimeter player. But he's got everything in the bag that you would want for the most part for a 7-foot basketball player. But then when you watch in practice, especially against the actual championship contenders, it just becomes more obvious that he's not able to get his offense off on demand like some of the other top players in the NBA. Anthony Edwards, on-demand offense, not fully formed yet. He's still trying to find some of his spots. Kyrie, Luka, on-demand offense, right? Cat, a little bit more of a spot-up shooter. When he starts to get into head-down, dribble to the rack, post-up mode, he'll definitely score some points doing it that way, get to the free throw line. But it's also littered with, like, offensive fouls and turnovers and stray voltage, frustration. So that's where it comes from me. It's complicated because he can give you insane performances throughout the regular season and postseason. No one's saying he's garbage or that he's not sometimes a number 1 or number 2 scoring option, but consistently, is he good enough to be a number 2 scoring option on an NBA championship team?
And
I don't think so.
The answer to the question is yes, your stock can fall in 3 years easily. It's pro sports. Careers aren't long. And look, every look that we've gotten at postseason Cat has told us more. It's told us more. It informs us, okay? Pre-Ant, Cat was your most important player almost at times by default, but he was. And then Ant comes in, and that changes the role. And then it becomes Ant's team. And Karl accepted all of that. I am no way saying he's a bad teammate. He seems like guys like him, okay? But the reality is this. We have now seen him in multiple playoff series. Like, this is not, to your point. When Karl was coming out of that first Rocket series, when Barkley and the TNT crew ripped him in 2018, 17, whatever
18.
that was, we defended him because we said, look, it's his first, yes, he looked soft, but it's his first go around there. Well, now he's almost 30. He's played in multiple playoff series. He's been outstanding, really good in 2 of them this year. Beyond that, he's been hit and miss. But here's the thing, too, and I don't understand why people don't seem to get this. When Karl talks about in the Western Conference Finals before Game 4, when he talks about, or after Game 3, talks about, I work on my shot all the time. I just have to laugh because it's a bad time to go cold. This is going to sound crazy, perhaps, but he's not allowed to go cold. Like, you can't go, like, one bad game, totally. But you can't go into a shooting slump. You can't be 0 for 8 from 3. It's funny because the national people want him to go back to posting up more, okay? And as we've discussed before, I think anyone that watches the Wolves is like, no, he can shoot threes. He should shoot threes. Rudy can post up, and Cat can too at times, right? But what makes him so special is the mismatches on the perimeter that allow him to make 3-point shots. And his 3-point shot, when it's going, is special. But I'm sorry, in my opinion, Karl's 3-point shot in the Western Conference Final didn't start to fall until Game 4 late. When really the pressure was now gone because it's like, can we win? Let's just try and win. Now the shot starts to go. And then last night, and Ant too, in garbage time, the game was done. They start to make shots. And so it pads the stats, a la, as I said, Kirk Cousins. But you can't have one of your star players, Phil, you can't have him disappear for a series, basically. Yeah. It's not allowed.
Yeah, it is. But it's allowed if he's a third or fourth guy, and like,
well, sure, but
like
I'm saying,
Nick Heel goes in and out, and you can still win, or Jaden goes in and out, and you can still win.
yeah,
When you're in that slot making max money, you don't get. And by the way, Anthony Edwards went out for some stretches, not to the degree that Cat did. Like games 1 and 2, he was struggling just as much in terms of like shooting percentage. Yep. But I give more leeway to the 22-year-old that's trying to figure things out, and the 22-year-old that bounced back in an alpha way for game 3 and then game 4. Mm-hmm. So it's a complicated conversation because Cat is a valuable, good player. He is one of the best three-point shooters in the league. He is currently your second best or maybe even most efficient offensive player. If you look at like regular season efficiency and compare it to Ant. But the conversation now is about Western Conference Finals to championship.
correct.
And when it was, how do you get to go back like 5 years? How do you go from 25 wins to 40? Let's get a guy like D'Lo in here and pair him up with Cat, and okay, and they win some extra games. And then the conversation went from, how do you go from 40 or 42 wins or 46 wins to 50 wins? And the front office said, D'Lo's not part of that process. Now they're trying to go from 56 wins to 60, or from 3 seed to 1 seed, or championship.
Yeah.
And it'll be really interesting to see, do they look at this thing and say, yes, this is, we just need to keep pushing with this core group and it will happen, or does another major tweak need to happen? Mm-hmm. Here's one from Aaron Karasov to us on Twitter. Totally different subject. At what point does the Minnesota fan base start to turn on Kevin Garnett? I was obsessed with him as a kid, but the more he keeps this up, like staying away from the organization, the more it bothers me. He's got his title in Boston, but can't give the Wolves fans even one appearance. It sucks. What do you make of that? Do you think, I put this question out on Twitter, are you frustrated by this? And most Wolves fans said, no, it's a beef between him and Glenn Taylor. He'll come back at some point.
Right.
What do you think?
I wish he had shown up, but nothing's changed in Kevin's mind. And if you grew up a Garnett fan, what you loved about him and his mentality is what's keeping him away right now. So he's never changed. He has a memory that is incredibly long. He has had at least 2 public falling outs with Glenn. Glenn is still trying to Bigfoot the team.
Yeah.
And so is it disappointing? Is it too bad? That's probably a better use of words. Is it too bad he didn't show up for a game, even with to be courtside with A-Rod and Laurie? Absolutely. But, if Glenn sells the team and then KG's like, screw you, that's totally different to me. But nothing's really changed here. Glenn is still trying to control this team. It sounds like KG, Phil, told A-Rod, basically had a prophecy about this entire thing. So this is what Glenn's going, be careful, watch your back. And A-Rod's like, I was just in Becky and Glenn's kitchen in Naples. It's all great. So no, this does not frustrate me because KG is very stubborn, can be nasty, but that's just him. And that's the player that a lot of you loved.
I will say I think he's letting his vendetta, a rightful vendetta against Glenn Taylor. I want Glenn Taylor to go away. And I understand that there's going to be major question marks about, okay, what happens when new ownership takes over? But he's been one of the worst owners in the history of the NBA, dating back 30 years. Train wreck after train wreck, bad hire after bad hire. Small, minimalistic thinking as opposed to big, grandiose thinking. Let's go get a guy like Tim Connolly. Well, why would a guy like that ever want to come here? Dude, get that mindset out of here. So I'm done with it. I understand why KG wants nothing to do with Glenn Taylor. At the same time, it's more about the fans than Glenn, and the fans love Kevin Garnett. And fans would have loved to see him join the party for a game at some point. And so I sort of sense that there are some frustrated fans. Now, at some point, he'll come back. They'll retire his jersey.
All forgiven.
Yep. He is the only meaningful player figure in franchise history that you'd ever even consider retiring a jersey for until Anthony Edwards and so forth. So By the way, just got a note from our guy, producer extraordinaire Ross Brendel, that clearance pricing on all Flagrant Howls related merchandise, scorenorth.com/shop.
I want my shirt.
Scorenorth.com/shop.
Ross, get me my shirt.
Bring your ass, Wolves culture, 48 minutes of howl, break every record. There's a ton of fun stuff. And Ross says down and dirty clearance pricing right now.
Everything must go.
Scorenorth.com/shop.
Fire sale. Everything must go.
Everything must go at scorenorth.com/shop.
It's like your old QVC baseball card shows.
We got wax boxes. We
It's
got
McGuire.
Donruss.
It's a McGuire rookie. It's unbelievable.
Topps 1984 Olympic McGuire.
Look at this one. Ken Griffey Jr.
We got Jordan wax boxes. Larry Bird wax boxes. Don West. Rest in peace, Don West, man.
Yes. So.
Well, that was a really fun playoff run. And man, the NBA offseason comes up fast. You got the finals coming up in a week. And then in 5 weeks from now, the NBA free agency and trade window opens up. Summer League in a couple
and the
months.
Wolves, the arbitration between Glenn, A-Rod, and Laurie. We got that. We got the potential approval. We got a lot of things. I just hope it breaks right for the franchise's sake. I really do.
Yeah, there's a lot of planes to land here. Like off-season roster construction, draft. Anthony Edwards Olympics is going to be interesting to follow here in the coming weeks and months.
Rudy, don't go play for France.
Rudy.
Just stay on your couch.
Rest those knees. Yeah.
You're too old.
He's too old. Well, we'll be back next week with several different episodes. We'll do a recap with Grady, Kyle Teige, Jim Peterson. He's the sports dad, Judd Zulgad. I am Phil Mackey. Positive Phil. Remaining positive for the long-term future of the Timberwolves on this Timberwolves lifestyle podcast, Flagrant Howls.